Kenny here with Gardening Simplified. Today it's March 14th, and I'm going to talk about why even bother gardening for the beginners and for some of you that are gardeners now. What I'm doing, and it seems like this is what I'm always doing, is planting seeds. I have some watermelons that I'm going to plant indoors, get a little jump on them, and I'm going to go ahead and pot them in bigger containers, just one seed like I normally do. And this variety here is kind of looks like this. I have a hard time, a lot of times I pull watermelons and they're not quite right, and the way this one's described, it's easy enough to tell if it's ripe or not, because the whole melon turns yellow on the outside. But it is a red meat watermelon. Some of y'all might think that you might not want one that looks that way. I know so many people, they won't even try a yellow meat or orange meat watermelon because it's not red inside. They just it's just not their thing. But anyway, partially I'm going to talk about seeds because part of the thing about gardening yourself is varieties. Now, you're not going to find this variety in the store. This is actually a Baker Creek seed. It's there's only 10 in the pack, or that's what they say, but you can see I've got 18 here and got half a dozen or so left. So we have a few more, but this is an heirloom seed. This isn't a F1 or something. And if you're not familiar with F1s are a first stage cross. So this F1 would be crossed with something else. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but they do that to get a better, whether it's disease resistance, a more vigorous plant or whatever. Now, GMOs are a different thing. GMOs are genetically modified organisms. So they've gene spliced and changed the DNA, and so they've made it to where it resists certain things, but it actually alters that one. And I don't recommend GMOs at all, because normally there's a lot of health problems that's associated with GMOs. And if you're going to grow a home garden, first thing, one of your reasons might be that you want a healthier food. And most of us that do that is what we're out for. Now, I grow organically. I don't use chemical pesticides. Now, I will use some bacterial pesticides occasionally, but it's really got to be out of the situation's got to kind of be out of control. I try to avoid having health problems with my plants that might tend to draw insects in. And like I said, I don't use a lot of the chemical sprays there. I do use Liquid 7, which is a chemical spray, but I don't put it on my crops. If I have ants in my walkways or something there, I might use it to deal with them if I can't use diatomaceous earth, because if it's wet, diatomaceous earth don't work real good. But if it's a dry period, it's excellent as far as to take care of that. But let's kind of get into this. This video is going to be on whether you should start a garden or not, and to look at your reasoning for starting a garden. And then we're going to look at the basics to getting started with a garden. Now, as you can see, this wasn't too hard planting these. I'll set them in some water here in a minute. I have some other plants here. These are some of my save seed Problemos. These were from a store, Problemo. It was a nice one, but it could have been an F1. So what that means is if I grow this seed from an F1, there's no telling what's going to come out of this. I mean, it could have something similar. It might be a good flavored one. I might come out with a certain plant that I might want to save seeds on again. Your heirloom seeds, or they're open pollinators that have been grown over and over and over, so they're true to what they are. That's one reason why I grow a lot of heirlooms like this. I can take this watermelon as long as I don't have other ones there around that the bees are going to cross-pollinate with, and I can save this seed. And so realistically, I should never have to buy a seed again unless something happens and I damage my seeds or something like that. But if you're going to start a garden, the first thing you need to think about is what your reasoning is. Okay, if you're wanting healthy food, you're not wanting a lot of that stuff that you find in the store that's actually GMOs or something like that. You don't want to end up with Frankenfood is what we commonly refer to it as. You want the real thing, something that's natural. That would be the first priority, because if you're going to grow GMOs and stuff like that, then don't bother planting a garden. Just go ahead and get your food there. The second thing is, don't expect your vegetables to be big and beautiful. I mean, not to say you can't have big and beautiful vegetables, but you have to realize that when you're growing your food organically so that you have good healthy food, you're not going to be using chemical fertilizers that just really release a whole lot of fertilizer. It doesn't really feed your soil, so you're going to have food, but you're not going to get the full benefits of the nutrients that food is capable of. Now, a lot of people, there's been more and more studies that everything has a frequency, and a lot of people talk to their plants, and if it's the case that everything has a frequency, then they would actually respond. Now, I don't talk to my plants. I'm sorry, I haven't got to that. If I see something that's more related to that, I might start just to have bigger, healthier plants. But realize if it does have a frequency, and everything's got a frequency, even your fertilizer, you're going to change the frequency that plant should be growing at. So the intent of a gardener growing in a home garden, whether it's a small bed or whatever, you want to grow your plant as natural as possible. Now, I created this YouTube channel for one purpose. I wanted to simplify gardening for the average person. Now, there's a lot of different gardening methods. Some people's going to say this is the only way. I've tried a lot of different ones. Some tend to work better for me. Some tend to not work as well. I'm not going to say that the methods that I show are going to be best, but do understand the best method for growing your food is to build a healthy soil. It's like anything. You've got to have a strong foundation if you're going to have strong vegetables. So let me get started, and we'll go out here and we'll talk about some stuff. Now, excuse my messy shop here. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of cardboard that I stack up here, and anything that I get in boxes, my wife will cut them down, break them down to where they can stack them, and then when we get a chance, we come out and we remove tape, or we'll just cut out a section where that tape is so that we don't have that in there. But what I'm getting at is cardboard boxes are an excellent place to start if you're going to start an in-ground garden, because you can get rid of most of the grass or weeds, and then you can put cardboard down, and then you can lay compost over the top of it, and you'll have a weed-free area to start out with. It's very simple, very quick. The cardboard gets moist. When you plant your plants above it, the roots go down through it, but the cardboard shades the grass below or emerging seeds and keeps them from coming up through it. And you can just cover your walkways and everything. A lot of times use a mulch or wood chips, or you can just do the whole thing with compost. Now, if you're lucky enough to be like me and you've got a compost business around that actually makes compost, and you can buy it in bulk, I still have a half a trailer load here, then you can order some. And initially, now for me, it's $80 for this whole trailer, 16-foot trailer loaded. And with that, I can do quite a bit of beds. Most of your smaller gardens that you'd want to start out with, this might even be too much for them, but you can always put it in thicker. You don't have to. I normally recommend when you start a bed to put out about 3 inches of compost to start and give you a good medium to start your vegetables in. Now, I do have stuff composting that I'm making my own compost, and there's all kinds of things that go in there, but this isn't something that you need to start out with, but it is really something that is good to have. You don't need one this big necessarily. It does work better when you have a bigger pile. But it's good to have something in a certain area that's contained so that you can start making your own compost. Okay. Another thing to consider is how big to make your garden. Now this garden here it's 1/3 of an acre, so it's really too big for the average person. But for the growing that I do, it's perfect. Now, I can say just like these plants here, I've just taken and put these out about a week, maybe just a little over a week ago. And you can see the difference in the size of how big they are, because my foot is about 12 inches, and you can see that plant is really taking over. Now, this is the second year on this bed, and it does have a weed or two in there. You tend to have less when you do this type of gardening. It's more weed free because you can go through and pick out a little. Like sometimes when you put in a bed, and you might get a few seeds that germinate out, but you can pick them out real little like that, and then you're done with it. But like I say, realize how big a garden you need, and don't get stuck in this idea that you have to have a single row for everything. Now, they call these market beds because they're wider, but when you set your garden up, and some people might want raised beds. Well, raised beds might prevent you from getting a few more seeds blown in. If they're high enough, they can keep some pests out, like carrot flies and stuff. Normally they don't go very high, so it kind of protects that. But I don't worry so much about my pest for that. I worry about having the maximum amount of growing space with the minimum amount of cost involved. If you want to spend a bunch of money, put in nice raised beds and everything else to keep it under control, that's fine. But the way this is, my beds are 36 inches wide, and my aisles are 2 foot. Now, it looks like my aisles are a little bit wider than that now, but whenever I put in my markers for these beds, that's the way they're set up. Most of these beds are 3 foot. I do have some that are 4 foot wide, but just the biggest majority are 3 foot wide. And the reason for that is when you start getting wider than 3 foot, now some market gardeners, they put in 30 inch, which that'd be fine too. But when you start getting up to 4 foot, it's really hard to work in the middle, especially when you're bending over. Now you might have to get down on your knees and use your hand for a prop so you can harvest, and that usually makes it a little bit harder. It's not so much whenever you're harvesting something like the broccoli here, but when you start getting into stuff like these Japanese red mustard, it gets to be a little harder to work in the middle, especially if you go to the full 4 foot wide. So be aware of that. Consider that whenever you're getting into gardening. When you lay out your beds, lay them out in a way that works for you. If you have a certain amount of area that you want your garden to be in, if you haven't gardened before, don't make it too big to start out with. Even though you have the area, start small, something that you can take care of. You can get down some kind of routine as far as how to take care of it, knowing that you have time to do the weeds, stuff, different things like that. And realize too, when you do this, you're going to have, just like right here, I have 2 plants that they passed away. I'm not going to be sad. I got another one over there, which I have moles under here. I know that's going to happen, but I plant enough plants that even though this happens, I'm still going to have plenty of vegetables for what I want to do. And don't worry about, I'm going to do a square foot gardening method or something like that. Don't be afraid to experiment. Realize plants need a little bit of area as far as, and if you're wanting bigger produce, you're going to have to spread it out more. But if you're in a small area, it's kind of like growing a cabbage. In fact, we'll go over here and we'll look at some cabbage. Now, I could have spaced these cabbages out a little bit wider, and they would make big heads quicker, but they're in there kind of close. For us, whenever we want to harvest a cabbage, or if we're going to pick some to take to the market, we don't necessarily want a real big cabbage. So realize that you can put your plants in a little bit closer. When I plant, just like my kohlrabi right here, I plant these in here tight. It might take them a little bit longer to grow into a large kohlrabi, but they will do it. Another thing is, if you're wanting to be low maintenance, you need to count on putting in some kind of watering system. Now, I like a drip system. It works perfectly. I can put it on a timer. When I take and set it up, I can just go off. If I get rain and I'm getting too much water in my garden, all I have to do is turn the valve off and come back and turn it on later. But realize this: whether you have a small raised bed. Now, this one was intentionally made to be a raised bed because we wanted to kind of keep our asparagus contained in a certain area. The same way with our herbs. A lot of herbs they're really like invasive weeds. A lot of them, when they get out, they tend to take over, especially like mints and stuff like that. They can actually take over your garden. So you want to be aware of your plants. Do an initial thought to what you're going to want to plant. Don't plant something just to grow it if you're starting out. Plant something that you like to eat. And realize a lot of things like, let's take lettuce for instance. Lettuce is a cool season plant. Now, they do have some varieties, and I've grown them even when it's been up in the 90s here, that are some heat resistant lettuces. And they don't take off and bolt right off. But realize this: when you go to plant your garden, don't plant your standard variety of lettuce in the middle of summer and then expect it to do well, because what's going to happen, it's going to get heat stressed and it's going to go to bolting right at just as soon as it comes up, and you're never going to get a crop. A lot of crops taste better when they're grown in the fall. Now I know for some of y'all that's in the northern areas, you have a more mild season, so they do good even during the summer. But for those of you in the south, like a lot of your carrots do better. Now carrots are all right when you grow them in the springtime too, but they taste a whole lot sweeter. There's a noticeable difference when you plant them in the fall and they go through winter. And realize this too: if you think you know what a vegetable tastes like and you haven't grown a garden before, you don't. Because your vegetables in your store, and I've known this because I've grown a garden for a long time, but every weekend when I go to the farmer's market and I have someone come up and they say, well, that's the best tasting broccoli I've ever ate, I tell them, well, that's what broccoli tastes like. Just because the store, you get that stuff that's kind of got a broccoli flavor, they're growing stuff, their type of vegetables, because they store well or they ship well or whatever reason like that. They're not growing them because they're the best flavored. They grow them so they can put a some type of food out there on the market that's going to stay. It's kind of like tomatoes. You go to the store, and all of us that grow gardens, we know what tomatoes taste like, and it's hard to make us buy a store-bought tomato, because whenever you've ate a real one, you don't want one of those that they pick when it's green, and then they ship it and they put it in a room and they gas it with the gas to make it start ripening up so it turns red. I've picked green tomatoes before from my garden in the end of the season, and I did it for a reason, to do an experiment this year or this last year. And some of them didn't ripen up. It took a couple of months. I had them way into December. In fact, the last one that was getting ripe, the seeds were actually growing inside of them. But what I'm getting at is the ones that ripened up on their own, even though they didn't ripen up on the plant, they were allowed to ripen naturally. Their flavor was still far superior than any that you buy in the store. So realize that's one reason why we grow a garden, is so that we actually have food that we can taste. And another thing is varieties, because whenever we plant our own seeds, we can grow varieties that have far better flavor, far more variety in the different ones. This year we've got some Abe Lincolns. These were a late edition. Those tomatoes are one of probably about 10 or 12 varieties that I'm growing this year. I have some eggplant here. This is a new variety for me. Normally I just plant the regular black beauties, but I've got 2 other varieties this year. My peppers, I have a nice selection. Most of them's already out in the garden, but I have some that's in the greenhouse, and I'm hoping to extend the season with these. I put them out earlier. I've grew them a lot earlier, so they're going to start coming on. But I've got a variety of peppers, and I have a variety of eggplant that's in here, so I can see how well I can extend the season in the greenhouse. It's always an experiment when you plant your own seeds, it doesn't cost much to lose a plant. And I have a whole tray here. These are an orange tomato that one of my seeds came from something else and got mixed in there in a packet I bought, and I saved a tomato, and I ended up with way more plants than I need. But when you save your own seeds, you can see they'll grow. Now, I don't know if that's going to be true to that type of tomato or not, but I'll know whether it's a good one once it starts bearing and I start picking them. If it isn't, then it's easy enough, pull it out and stick something else in there. But I have a whole lot. This is another one I saved. This was a small red one, and it's doing good. I had a few Cherokee purples I forgot to save seeds from, but I got plenty of plants that I can save them this year. But I have all kinds of tomatoes in there. Now, normally I don't take and start my cucumbers off, but I did this year. Now, these want to get out in the ground, and they'll probably get out today. But you can grow such a variety. There's 3 varieties right there. And these aren't all I'm going to grow. I have some more seeds that I need to get started, but these were the ones I was going to try to grow early. Lettuce, like I say, when you grow lettuce, now this is called Heat Wave, and this is supposed to be a lettuce that does well in the heat, and that's what you want to do. I have another variety that's Summer Crisp, and it was planted out in the hot heat. As long as it gets plenty of moisture and got good fertile ground, it grows like crazy, and you harvest a bunch. So there are varieties out there that you can plant. You just need to look for them. But you need to consider all this whenever you're going into gardening. Now, these here tomatoes, this is the first year that I've grown potato leaf tomatoes. Now, these are true blacks, and I have some other ones. Well, these are true black Brandywine. I have some other varieties that's potato leaf too. But that's the wonderful thing about planting your own garden. You can go with those varieties. Now, when I put my plants out, I save a few plants here, and where I've lost the ones out there in the garden, I can come back, and now I can just get these plants and drop them in there and complete that row. And if I don't have extra plants of that kind, a lot of times I plant a different type of plant in there. Now, this lettuce here, this lettuce was planted last year, and I'm not sure, but I'm going to think it was in late October or November sometime. And we've been cropping this all through the winter. We've had lettuce. In fact, we just day before yesterday we picked them all down small, and we'll do it again this coming Friday. But it's getting close to the time, because its age, it's going to start seeding. And you can see how much it's been cropped when you look at the bottom of it and see how tall it is where the leaves have come off it. Now, another thing, whenever you grow a garden, you need to recognize when your plant is going to seed. Now, if I had some lettuce, I'd show you, but I can show you on some of it's easy enough, because you'll see the seeds start blooming and coming out and flowering. But some you might catch it a little bit earlier. When this is mustard, and you can see it's starting to put up its seed top, but what happens first, you'll see the leaves start to get, see, this hadn't done a seed top quite yet, but the leaves start getting way far apart. Normally when you're harvesting it, the leaves are sectioned out real close together. When it starts to extend, that's when it's fixing to go to seed. And if you can recognize that, it's good. Now, some of these, you can see how this one here is still good and close and big leaves, but it won't be long It's not quite got there, but it won't be long. It'll go to seed. And that's something you need to realize when you are taking and harvesting your crop, because a lot of times what you can do, and because these plants are packed in here tight, you can pull these plants out or cut them off. It's what I like to do, and just leave the roots in. But you can cut them out and you give these other plants room, and a lot of times that will keep them from going to that point. Now a lot of these, I think, have done this because of the weather, when we had that deep freeze come down here, so it changed them. But a lot of plants it didn't affect, like the turnip right here next to it. It didn't affect it at all. And we come over here too. I want to talk about pests. Now you can see there's little holes in these leaves. There's pests in here, and a lot of times I'll come and look and see if I can see what pest. But you might have a pest that just bothers it a little bit and goes off. Now I do find seeds on some leaves, and then eggs on some leaves, and I'll just mash them, and that'll take care of that pest problem. But when I have a minor issue like this, I don't try to address it, because like in here I have ladybugs that I've seen around here. I have all kinds of things off in here. I got a little mosquito hawk hiding down in there. There's a lot of beneficial insects that are in the garden, and when you go spraying this because you're worried about these few, what you end up doing is you kill your beneficial insects, and then those bad ones that you didn't get all of them knocked back, you don't have the good beneficial insects to come back and take over. Like there are aphids that are on here, and I don't know if a lot of you, which just talking about ladybugs, you can see right down off in here you got a little ladybug hiding around there. And you need to know what the nymph stages of these bugs are too, because a ladybug, when it hatches out and it doesn't look anything like a ladybug, and you might want to kill something because you see a bunch of them and you think it's an infestation, but know what kind of bugs they are. Because if you start killing everything that's the bug, and if you don't like bugs, don't garden, because you're going to have bugs there. If you don't like worms, don't garden, because if your garden really gets healthy, you're going to have worms, and when you have worms, your garden's going to get healthier. So know this. But on this bug deal, you need to really think about it before you start deciding to spray. I have the same thing off in here. I have some holes over there, and I kind of watch for caterpillars. Now, caterpillars are one of those things I try to keep under control, and I can use a bacterial spray to make sure if there is a problem that I get rid of it, because the bacterial spray like BT, it only affects bugs that chew on the leaves. And then it does something to their digestional tract, the way I understand. But there is a situation where something is eating on these, and it seems to be enjoying itself, but I haven't found it yet. So, but anyway, this crop is getting close to being too big, what you look for. Now this does have a big stem, but what you'll watch for is when you pop it off, if it gets real stringy. Now this is starting to get just a little stringy where it snapped off, and that's when you start noticing it's not as tender. Now this one is still not at a point to where I'd say you have to take it out, but being it's getting starting to get eaten up by some type of insect, what I'll end up doing is taking these, I'll cut them all off, and I'll run them through my bag and mower so they're chopped up fine. And then I'll either put them back on a row if I need some kind of treatment for root knot nematodes. Mustard greens are real good. The chemical that they have in them is real effective against root knot nematodes. So, and that's the reason why I'm growing a lot of this up here, is for that fact, because brassicas aren't affected by it, and mustard greens and stuff like that, they're not affected, and they drop the population. So you want to, if you have a pest, you want to use a method that's going to benefit you. But these are all things that you need to know before you start. You need to understand soil biology. The less you disturb it, the better the microbiology. Things like, and you can't hardly see them, but they're down there, like these carrots. Carrots take a lot of moisture to germinate, and these I just uncovered today. I put a covering over, which you can see in my garden update. But little things like that, when you learn them, they make it a lot better for you whenever you're gardening. If you're trying to grow carrots and you can't get your seeds to come up, you need to understand these little tricks that helps you to get them out of the ground. You don't have to grow these lettuce here. These were put out in little bitty cell trays, 200 cell trays, and you can see that pretty much all of them's taken hold. It looks like, well, that one's kind of struggling maybe over there, but pretty much all of them's taken hold, and these are planted in here real tight. This variety of lettuce, and like I say, you need to know varieties, but this is a leaf lettuce. I don't grow this for a head. And you understand that your vegetables, the color, a lot of times, like your red leaf lettuce, it has higher antioxidants in it. So you might like the green, but you're not going to have, well, you'll have a little flavor difference with them, but they'll be totally different. Now there's a bunch of different kinds here. You can see you have this one here that's green. This one here is kind of green, and it does out red, same way as this one. Now this one is more of a red. I think there's five different varieties in here. So when I start picking lettuce, I've got a mixture of a bunch of different types, which gives a really flavorful and colorful salad. So consider that whenever you plant. Like I say, you don't have to have a lot of area. There's certain things you need to know that's going to take more time. And you need to understand that if you're planting in the cooler season, fall and winter, don't expect your harvest times to be, date to harvest to be anywhere close, because it's going to take you a lot longer time period. And like these carrots are planted in here real tight. This is kind of an experimental thing. The rows are about 4 inches apart, and then they're kind of spread out in there. I need to do just a little bit of weeding while they're still small enough and get out. Understand your weeds too. This here is chickweed. Now chickweed is one of those weeds that keeps wanting to come back, but also chickweed has medicinal properties. So you might actually want to take some of that, learn about some of these, what we call weeds, anything that's in the place where it shouldn't be. These little carrots here, this carrot is actually a weed because it's not the same kind as the rest of these. There's a few that's a little bigger because the first batch didn't come up like it was supposed to, so I replanted, and you can see where the rows are well defined. That's where all the new ones are. But realize that as you grow your garden, that you need to know what stuff looks like. When little carrots come up, they look like you got grass coming up. I mean, get an idea of what something looks like when it starts growing, so that you won't be, I know this is grass here and weeds. I know what these look like. But there is some grass that's in here, like barnyard and stuff, that favors that when it comes up, but it's not quite. So get used to what a plant's supposed to look like. Some plants, like these are red onions. Now, if you're going to grow a bulb onion, you really need to have a good sized garden area, because they take up a lot of space for a pretty long period of time. And I'm not sure if it's like 120 days or something from the time you put sets in the ground. So that's a long time. Then it takes, when I grow my sets from seeds, anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks to get those grown. So it's a long crop in your garden, and you're not going to be able to grow something else there. So you need to decide. Now, if you're growing table onions where they don't bulb, you can put them in tight. They'll do well, and you just pull them out as you need. You don't need as much space. But when you're planting bulbing onions, it takes a lot of space. Some of you might like strawberries in your garden. Well, strawberries, they'll sit in there pretty tight. Now, these are spaced out a little bit, but if you wanted, you could put them in closer. I wanted mine kind of left out so I can I still got to finish out my row down there. This is as big as it's going to get, but I want to let some of these runners come. Now, this runner right here is it's already got flowers and strawberries coming on it. I need to get a little pot down here and take care of that, so I can pot it up and let it root off in there and then cut it loose. But know about your plants too, like this strawberries. If you're going to grow them, know about keeping the runners cut off. If you want to keep harvesting them, these are ever bearing, so it's not like they bear in the spring and then they stop, or bear in June or something, they stop. They start bearing now. They'll put on a bunch of strawberries, and then they go year round. Now, I might end up putting some shade cloth to make it easier on them, but I intentionally, it's when you plan your garden, intentionally plan it in a way that it helps your plants. This is the west side of my garden, and the woods are there and has some pretty tall trees. So what I've done is I planted these down here so they'll get shade earlier in the day during the hot season, because right now there's no leaves. They're not losing any sunlight, so they benefit this time of year from no leaves on the trees. But during the summer they benefit from the leaves on the trees, because they'll be able to get that extra shade in it, and that heat won't have such an effect on them. But realize this, but whenever I was talking about building these beds, the advantage to this bed is, and you can see this is 2 rows down here. These are peppers. You can do peppers, tomatoes, any of your plants same way. This has a drip line that's 18 inches, so each one of these plants is 1.5 feet apart. But I stagger them so they're kind of like a triangle or a zigzag across here. That gives more room for these plants to open up and fill. If you put them side by side, you end up with this area in the middle that's an open spot that's not being utilized, so you can have extra leaves. It just benefits better that way. But the other thing is, if you have a pathway that you can work in, and 18 inches is really too narrow. 2 foot is about right for working in. Well, if you had 2 rows like this, you figure you would have to have use up another 2 foot space if you separated these, even if you had a 1.5-inch row or a 1.5-foot row. So what I'm getting at is, you can, with a market garden bed system like this, you can put more vegetables in a smaller area and still be able to work around them. And this bed here is plenty narrow enough that I can reach out in it and not worry about falling on my head. So that's another important thing. The other thing I'm going to say, and I said, grow vegetables that are a variety of something that you're going to like. If you don't like cabbage, don't plant cabbage. You know, unless you have a lot of room and you just want to plant something so you can feed the neighbors. You know, that'd be totally up to you as far as the way that goes. But and I have stuff coming up that I'm not sure about. Anyway, take something and grow vegetables that are easy to manage too. If you're first growing, you know, if you like squash plants are pretty low maintenance. The biggest amount that you're going to do to them is picking your fruit on a regular basis. Tomatoes are always a good thing, but realize you're going to have some type of stake to support them to, or a basket to put around them, some kind of cage. Potatoes are easy to grow. It's just a matter of sticking them in the ground, you know. But realize if you're going to grow a lot of potatoes, you're going to have a place to store them too. And normally I'd say they store pretty good for probably about 4 to 6 months. It just varies. So and especially in the South now, we like new potatoes. It's nothing like cooking up some new potatoes whole, or maybe putting them in with some fresh green beans, which that'll be what I'm planting today. Green beans are an easy one to grow, but consider that when you're going to start growing. And if you don't want to spend time, if you think that you're just going to put those seeds in the ground and you're not going to have to deal with it, don't even bother starting, because you're going to put in effort and you're not going to be happy. You're going to be stressed over it. Realize you're going to have to pull a weed or something here. Even whenever I walk out here and I see, and it doesn't take long with this system, I'll come in here, and even these little bitty weeds here, when I'm bent over and I can see them, they'll come out, because and I pull them out at the roots, because if you don't get the roots out, a lot of times they'll grow right back. But usually I carry a bucket with me, because one thing that's going to draw insects in there is a plant that's dying because you pulled it up. They're going to, whatever chemical that it emits whenever it's not healthy, that's going to draw an insect to it. So realize that. But there's so much that I could advice I could try to give a beginning gardener, but the main thing that I want to stress for those of you that are considering it is, don't be afraid, and try a method that's simple for you to get started, because it doesn't cost a lot to get started. You can buy a pack of seeds down at your local home supply store. You can use solo cups for planting them in, and if they don't grow, then you know you're not out anything. But recognize your varieties that you have available, and what I always try to say is, if you can, go to one of these heirloom varieties. They've been around a long time, and a lot of them do have a good disease resistance. so you don't have to worry about something happening there. Now, and I say recognize weeds. Now, this looks like grass right here, almost identical, but I know that this is where I planted my cilantro. So as it's just now coming up, and that is actually in the row, so I won't pull anything out of there until it gets to the point to where its leaves are too big and it hadn't changed to what it should look like. But yeah, don't be afraid. Don't go too big. And if you want to, go ahead and talk to those plants. I don't know that it'll do any good, but a lot of people say it does. If you want to see more of my videos, just hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you'll be notified. Give it a big thumbs up and share this video. It really helps my channel. Happy gardening.